A serious Christian desires to be led by God. The process is similar with human leaders. The 5 principles a human leader would like for success from their workers is for them to be one with him or her by understanding what he or she wants, feeling joy through the work, accepting possible risks, and confidently following his or her direction and giving credit to their leadership. To further follow God, it's helpful to consider which of these basic principles might be your strength and which one you should be working on. I had the privilege in the late 1980s at St. Mary's of hearing Father Bob Bedard preach deep teachings on these 5 fundamentals that help parishioners follow God. It led as well to producing many local and even international ministries. As shown in the book, Permission Granted, St. Mary's was one of the most successful Catholic parishes in North America over the last 50 years. The first key fundamental is prayer, since hearing directly from God is more difficult than hearing from other leaders. Father Bob talked about prayer in over 75% of his sermons. Here is a talk at St. Mary's that helped parishioners get closer to God.
Prayer, very simply defined, is communion with the Lord. Sometimes we use the word communication. Communion with the Lord. Therefore, implied right away is that prayer is a two-way arrangement. It goes both ways. It's communion. I talk and I listen. It's dialogue, in other words. That's at the very heart of prayer. And very often, one of the problems we have is that we feel prayer, or the only prayer we're comfortable with, the only prayer we know how to do anything with, is to talk. And we talk at the Lord continually, perhaps. We even multiply words, pour words at Him. And we don't give Him equal time. In fact, very often we don't give Him any time. It's communion. It's two-way. It's dialogue. I should, in prayer, spend as much time listening to the Lord as I spend talking to Him. And when you use an expression like that or say things like that, sometimes people look at you and say, well, like, what do you mean? Is God going to talk to me? Well, obviously, if prayer is communion with the Lord, the answer to that has got to be yes. Yes, the Lord is going to talk to us. Yes, the Bible is filled with that. On every page of the Bible, the assumption is that God communicates with His people. So yes, we should expect the Lord to speak to us. The big question is, well, how does He do it? Well, that's what we're talking about. He doesn't talk in the same way that I do. He talks in another way. He talks in His way. And for me to get into prayer, I have to try to pick up how He speaks, how the Lord speaks to me. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Prayer, then, first of all, is a two-way process. It's communion with the Lord. It's talking and listening. Matthew 6:7, Jesus Himself says, do not multiply words. Doesn't mean we're not supposed to use any words, but don't multiply them needlessly. He says, as the pagans do, as some of the people who follow other religions do. All they do is talk. The more words, the better. That's not necessarily prayer at all. Talking and listening. Okay, next point. It is necessary for the believer to pray. You and I are called into friendship with God, aren't we? We are called into intimacy with the Lord. That's what He has in mind. That's not a special gift or a special call that He has in mind for just a few select people. But rather, the Lord wants to be on intimate terms with every single human being. And He's quite capable of doing that. He wants to be, and make no mistake about it, He wants to be on intimate terms with you. So it's friendship then, it's intimacy. If I am to grow in friendship or intimacy with anybody, one of the things I must do is spend time with the person. There's no way I can develop a friendship with somebody without spending time with him or her. I've got to spend time. It doesn't make sense to think that I can be on close terms with somebody without spending time with the person. So that obviously then it is necessary for us, if we are to grow in intimacy with the Lord, to spend time with Him. Okay? Now it is not enough for somebody to say, well look, I spend my whole day with the Lord, you say. Like I get up and I say that prayer in the morning that I was taught to say in school called the morning offering. And I offer everything to the Lord. And then I tear out at the day. And the whole thing's a prayer. Well, fine, the whole thing is given to the Lord, but the whole thing is not a prayer at all. That's not prayer. Tearing around through the day is not prayer. It's very good. It's a good thing to go to work. It's a good thing to be busy about the stuff you're supposed to be doing. It's a marvelous thing to do your duty. It's a marvelous thing to reach out and touch people and to minister to others. It's wonderful to read. It's wonderful to do 1,000 different things, but it's not prayer. Prayer is prayer. Only prayer is prayer. Work is not prayer. Okay? I remember hearing one fellow say that specifically. He said, I can't pray. I'm just not that kind of person. My work is my prayer. That's what he said. You know, and as gently as possible, I try to make the point that was not true. Your work is your work. Only prayer is prayer. Okay? Prayer is communion with God. And that requires doing precisely what Jesus said about prayer. He said, when you pray, go into your private room and close the door. And commune then with your Father in secret. That's the only way you can pray. Or that's the best way you can. That's the way He recommends. That you find a quiet place and obviously a quiet time so that you can give the Lord time and opportunity to speak to you. That's the way it's got to be. And we can easily cop out of that. You know, and you might say, well, that's very easy for him. You know, he doesn't have a family to take care of. He doesn't have a household of squalling hyenas and all this kind of stuff to deal with. He doesn't have that to deal with. That's very simple for him. He's single, you know, he's got his own pad and all that kind of stuff. Well, whatever the story is. It's not so simple. But just the same, what the Lord is saying to you and to me, all of us, is find the place and find the time where you can come aside with me. Jesus did that. He was surrounded by crowds. He was mobbed continually. Morning, noon, and night. He was continually assaulted and affronted and everything else by mobs of people. What he did was get up very early in the morning and go off out into the hillsides outside of town and spend time with the Father. That's what he found, the place and the time. For you and for me, we have to find the place and the time, wherever it is. Okay? There has to be a private room of some kind. You know, and some people are saying, well, good luck for me to try to find some kind of private room and private place. Whatever. I won't make any too concrete suggestions. That's up to each one of us. But we have to find the place. Otherwise, we can't pray properly. We can't give the Lord time. There's got to be a time. Sometimes people will say, well, that obviously is the way to pray, so therefore we don't have to go to church. We don't have to assemble. Because Jesus said, when you pray, find the quiet place and the quiet time. Well, he wasn't talking about assembling. That's something else. We mustn't confuse prayer on the one hand with worship on the other. Yes, we are called to worship God as an assembly of believers. And we must gather together and make some noise in order to do it. At least we make noise all the time when we gather in assemblies, but we have to do that. That's the worship. But we must also pray. And prayer is the quiet thing.
Of course, it is easy to praise the Lord, but very few of us will spend a significant amount of time every day in also quietly listening to God. Father Bob's teaching on this certainly helped the St. Mary's parishioners.